Hello, I'm SB Moores, and today I wanted to talk about another book that I really enjoy, that being The Black Company by Glen Cook, the first book in his Black Company series. Also, ironically, the only one that I've read. Very titular, but I figured that it would make a lot of sense to talk about this as a little interlude between all my Malazan videos because I'd imagine that most people who like Malazan either know about the Black Company or maybe have read it. Steven Erikson likes the Black Company and Glenn Cook's writing. I have one of his other series, The Dread Empire, and I have an omnibus edition of the fourth and fifth book of that, and it has a foreword by Steven Erikson. Um, there's a funny line in it where he says that Ian C. Esselmont is the one who introduced him to Glenn Cook and the Dread Empire, and he has a cheeky line that says something like, "And look what's come of all that, eh?" Which is we know what's come of all that. Obviously, Malazan's great, but today I just wanted to talk about the Black Company because it's a really good dark fantasy book. It's a really good grim dark fantasy book, and it's very non-traditional and it's very unique in the fantasy genre. And I've heard people say that there are two eras of fantasy. There is before Glenn Cook and the Black Company, and there is after the Black Company. And I can definitely understand it because it's unlike anything else that I've ever read. I might not be the most well read person in general, but all I read is fantasy and sci fi so far. So, among all those, this is definitely the most unique among them that I've read, besides maybe Malazan itself and the Stormlight Archive, which is unique in different ways. But so I just wanted to talk about this a little bit. So the first thing that I feel like should be said about this book that really sets it apart from everything else that I've ever read is that it is written in first person. I have never read another fantasy book that's written in first person. There's been small chunks, small vignettes in first person. Even in Malazan, there are small tidbits where a character says I, but that's usually because they're reading something that a different character wrote. Like in I shouldn't say, just in case you're watching this and you haven't read Malazan, but it has occurred, and this book is entirely written in first person. And not only that, it's written in a very unique style because it's supposed to be the annals of the Black Company. It is not one character, it's a character recounting what they're experiencing, but they're not recounting it every single detail. They're just recounting it in a general term so that the people who read the annals know what the Black Company did. Now, as for a little plot explanation that would make some sense, this specific book is about the titular Black Company, a mercenary group embarking on a mission to aid a new conqueror making an empire called the Lady. And there's a whole ton of lore that gets into her with magic and an older empire by that was made by her husband called the Dominator, and all sorts of stuff with that. And that's really where the crux of the grimdark aspect of this series, the dark fantasy aspect, comes, which is that the Black Company don't work for good. They're not good soldiers. They're good soldiers in the sense that they're effective, but they don't care what they do. They fight for whoever pays the most money. And the lady has more money than the rebels do, which I'll get more into that. But so they work for her and they do the back of the book even says that some feel the lady, newly risen from centuries in thrall, stands between humankind and evil. Some feel she is evil itself, and that sentiment's very strong among a lot of the people of the jeweled cities, or the jewel cities. Um, that is something that I should also talk about, which is the lack of expository explanations for everything. Like I said, we do know a little bit about the lady, that she is ancient, that she was married to a guy called the Dominator who had his own empire, and that she's a powerful sorceress. But certain things aren't really explained, they're just stated because it's written like an annal, so it's assuming you would know what the text is already talking about. Like, the Jewel Cities. We don't know anything about the Jewel Cities. It's just sort of stated. Um, it's that sort of aspect of storytelling that I really enjoy in Malazan as well, which is not hugely intense lore dumps. People just start talking about stuff in a very diegetic way because that makes the most sense. If a character's talking to another character, they're going to be like, "Oh, we're in the Jewel Cities," and they're going to be like, "Well, what are the Jewel Cities?" It's like, no, these people have known each other for forever. They know the world, and the only real way to do that, in my opinion, in a story is to introduce a new character that's foreign to all this stuff, or this is well, actually it started out as literature, but not in the sense of where words on a page, but also pictures. At least with one series that I like, the Attack on Titan, uh we get basically reintroduced to the world at some point, and it's kind of confusing. And we're thrown into the midst of a war, kind of like how the Black Company and Malazan work. But in order to explain it, one of the characters has temporary shell shock, and all the characters have a little bit of remembrance and then a joke with each other of like, "Oh, why are we here?" And they're just sort of, a little bit of banter, not in a too serious way, but um, the Black Company doesn't do that, and I'm actually quite happy about that as well. And Malzahn doesn't really do it either. But this book's definitely interesting for that reason, and the dark nature of the titular mercenary group as well. Um, More of the plot of the story, it goes into the cabal or the order of sorcerers and sorceresses who work under the lady, called the Ten Who Were Taken, corrupted by her influence and now on her side. And let me just say that's one of the coolest fantasy names that I've ever heard. The Ten Who Were Taken. It sounds really dope in my opinion. I think it's a very cool title. The Lady is also an imposing title. No particular crazy fantasy name or anything like that. It's just the Lady. She's the lady, and or like the dominator. They're really simple, and I really enjoy it for that reason. And that also speaks to some of the character names in the Black Company. Now, I don't know if this is a thing that happens in real militaries around the world or throughout history. I would imagine it is, which is nicknames. And I mean, I've heard of call signs and whatnot, but with the more impromptu, not impromptu, with the more like the nicknames that people use every single time, but they're also kind of in like a joking way because they are nicknames. That's definitely prevalent in this with characters such as One Eye, who you can probably imagine why he's called One Eye. Croaker, I don't think is the main character's real name. I think that's just what they call him. Um, there is Raven. I forget if that's his real name, so maybe that doesn't make as much sense what I said now, but I'm pretty sure it's just like a nickname they have for each other. And Goblin. I know Goblin's not his real name, they just call him that because they think he's ugly, which is kind of rude but kind of funny. And it's that soldier banter and humor that I think makes the Black Company really good. I read this back in high school. I actually read it before I read Malzahn, and I reread the first chapter just to get myself reacquainted with Glenn Cook's writing. And I remember why I finished this book in 3 days. Because, wow. I mean, it is a short book. This edition that I have, I think it's just a standard tour trade paperback. Very small, just the first book. And the first book is very short. It's only 300 pages, just about, and it's 7 chapters. And the last one's only like 4, 10 pages, and the rest are a little longer. So, I mean, it's feasible to read a chapter a day and finish it, and it's also feasible to just finish it in one day because it is that good. I read it in three. Took me a little bit, but I'm a slow reader. Um, from time to time, sometimes I can be pretty fast. I read Elantris in well, it's not too long, so maybe I am a slow reader. But um, it's a very short book, and that's something that really sets it apart from a lot of other epic fantasy because even though this is a very grimdark military fantasy, it is also epic in the sense that it's a completely different world from ours. There's crazy sorceries going on, there's lycanthropy, there's roving armies and massive wars and sieges and insane powers at play here, dark gods, and everything along those lines, which I feel are all very indicative of the epic fantasy genre. I don't think you could. I guess you could make an argument that it's high or not epic. High and epic are the same thing in my opinion. But when I think of high, I think of classic fantasy. When I think of epic, I think of modern fantasy, whatever that is these days, be it Brandon Sanderson or Malazan. Um, but this definitely is that epic fantasy, but it's not super long. It doesn't have roving paragraphs that go on and on and on, and it doesn't have exhaustive explanations, like I said. Not that all epic fantasy do, but even beyond that, it doesn't have multiple points of view, and it doesn't take into account every side of this war that this specific book covers, which I think is very good for the kind of story that this is telling, and it's focused on the black company. It's not about anybody else but the soldiers of the black company, which I really enjoy. Obviously, other characters come into play, like the lady are talked about quite often, and that's the catalyst for everything that's happening. And there's cool plot lines going on with other characters such as Soulcatcher, but and the Limper, but which are one of two of the 10 who were taken. Obviously, I don't think I need to say it at this point, but this is full spoilers for the whole book. But there is that aspect to it, which is enjoyable, and all the characters also feel real. They try to do stuff to the best of their abilities. They make human choices that seem calculated and not very flippant and not like the author just thought it was a cool thing to do. Sometimes it is a cool thing to do, but it also feels like these characters are important and they are truly being tactical about everything that's going on, both in the Black Company and people who are out. Most of those characters that are not in the Black Company that get dealt with are the 10 who were taken. The sorceress cabal that works under the lady. And talking about them in specific, they are a huge part of this book and all the events therein. And one of the most interesting aspects about them, because people view the lady as evil, you'd probably view her cabal as evil. And there's definitely some evidence for that. There's one rather distasteful part of the book where soldiers who are working under the Limper, I believe, do some very heinous things to a village, and then they make a grandfather watch them mess with his granddaughter, which is very brutal and horrible. It's one of those aspects that really shows you how grimdark it is. The Black Company aren't working for very good people. You could even argue that not everybody, or even any of the characters in the Black Company, are good people themselves. They are soldiers at heart, and that's definitely true for this book. Um, excuse me. That definitely becomes evident with with the main character himself, Croker. There is one point where he talks about some of his darkest desires in a dream that he has, and it's disgusting. It's deplorable. It's horrible. And he even acknowledges it that he realizes how terrible it is, and he would never do that in real life. But um, he still has that dream and says that he was quite happy in his dream, which is you know, you could argue very humanizing because not everybody's a good person, especially not main characters in books. So, regardless, I do enjoy every character in this book, and I do enjoy Croker, and I do enjoy the Captain and One Eye and Raven and Goblin and everybody. Um, one of the other aspects of this book that's very good is the actual prose itself, the writing. Um, Glenn Cook is not a very flamboyant writer most of the time. He's also not a very fully prose is how people describe it, over flowery prose. Um, you're not going to be pulling out a dictionary very often reading this. At least I wasn't. And when I read this, my vocabulary probably wasn't as good as it is today, being older and having read a lot of books since then. Um, so I would, uh, even despite that, flowery prose does not make good prose. Um, I do enjoy really flowery prose. I do enjoy a lot of adjectives and a lot of meandering thoughts, but that is not what this does, and it does it very well with sort of curt explanations for stuff followed by really powerful imagery. I think the best example is probably the first chapter and the start of it, where I believe it starts. I want to say I remembered off the top of my head, but let's not misquote. There were prodigies and portents enough, One Eye says. We must blame ourselves for misinterpreting them. One Eye's handicap in no way impairs his marvelous hindsight. That's a killer start to a book. I think that that's great going looking back on everything with that hindsight and also immediately setting up this one eye character as being wise possibly. Um and then afterward, it goes into a paragraph that explains a very interesting thing with a necropolitan hill and lightning hitting it, and this ancient creature that was trapped within called a Forvalaka, which is a lycanthropy of some kind, a were something. In specific, I think it's a were leopard or a were tiger. Um, and I believe they mentioned that it's super powerful, that they would not be able to kill it. With their mages wouldn't be able to kill this thing. Um, which is another aspect that I really enjoy. These mages are powerful, but they're not world destroying god level entities. I mean, a were leopard is more than enough to kill them. An adult were leopard, female, they mentioned, I believe. But what's interesting, but going back to the prose, what's interesting is that right after that, the next chapter, I believe, or not next chapter, um, there is a part after that in the next what is it in the next paragraph where they essentially kind of back away from that thing we were saying where we have marvelous hindsight and they go astrologers were refusing readings and everything was dangerous, which is kind of a good juxtaposition in my opinion to start off the book. I remember this point was made in a video I watched about the Black Company. I forget when or what video it was. um but I really enjoyed it. And they mentioned that, and after that was, I think I watched that a while ago, but maybe not. Maybe that was like a week ago. But whatever the case, I then reread the first chapter of this, and I really realized it after it was pointed out to me. Um, but his descriptions are quite curt. I really enjoy how there's not a lot of the journey from A to B. This was another thing that was pointed out to me that I realized when I remembered my reading of it all those years ago, which is unlike, let me use it as an example again, Malazan, where often we will follow the soldiers as they're walking across landscapes for days, weeks, maybe even months, and we follow that. The Black Company doesn't do that. Chapter one and chapter two, I believe there is a big a voyage that takes place to get from the city that they're starting into the city they need to go in to get hired by the lady, and we don't follow that journey to my knowledge. We just go. There might be a conversation or two, but then it's just we're there. I don't even think there's a vignette break. There's at least in the first chapter, there's a section where they mention that a column of soldiers, the Black Company, have to march to the main keep of the castle of the city that they are in, and it's only like a paragraph description of them walking through an entire city. But you really, even though you can't imagine the city every single detail, you can imagine what a seaside fantasy city in this kind of setting looks like. It's very powerful in my opinion, or at least the image in my mind was very good. And the descriptions he does give tell maybe not the stationary objects of the city like the buildings. It doesn't really give too much of an explanation of that, but you get more of a sense of the hustle and bustle of everything that's going around, which is in my opinion more than enough, and it works very well for the type of book that the Black Company is. um Combat wise, I can't say too much. I don't remember a lot. What I do remember is in the final battle, there was a lot of interesting things going on with the siege or the final battle in general, with the war elephants getting taken out. And also one of my favorite aspects of this book, which is despite the fact that it's grimdark, maybe you don't want to give it that label right off the bat because the ending of the book has a little bit of hope. One other big plot point of this book is that the rebels that are fighting against the lady have someone on their side, which is a child prophesized to be that will destroy all evil, being the lady, called the White Rose. One of the interesting things about this book is that at the end of that final battle, the Black Company wins, the ladies' armies are victorious. They go to see the girl that was glowing that they thought was the White Rose, and she was just some random girl that they had. They even mention one of the mages mentions that he could the second that he saw her, he knew that it was a sorcery from the person sitting behind that girl. So it's really interesting that, and it's very telling of the rebellion. And I think it's one of the best parts about the book is that even though it's only from one perspective, you get a good idea of what's going on the other sides, and you sort of can get a flavor of what they're like. You get a flavor of this rebellion. They tried their hardest to find this girl, and they couldn't. So they just buckled down and they gave the people a symbol of hope in a random girl that was glowing, and they said, "Oh, she is the White Rose. Come with the comet." One of the most interesting things, in my opinion, and it was good twist around that you probably saw coming. The girl that was being messed with while her grandfather watched by the Limpers, or maybe it was Rakers, troops that the Black Company save. I think his name is Silent, or maybe it's Raven, ends up saving her and taking her in with the Black Company, and we find out that she is the White Rose. And the book has the final line of this book is very good in my opinion, the final lines, because I feel like it really wraps up everything that's happened, and it adds that little bit of hope because once the Black Company realizes that she's the White Rose, because of their contract, they should kill her immediately. But they don't want to, because there still is that inkling of good in these soldiers, that inkling of what is right and what is wrong, and they don't want to kill a child. Um, and I think the final lines are really cool, especially Croker's way of describing everything and recounting these events in his annals are very interesting, and his personality seeps in quite a bit, which I very much enjoy. But it ends with, "Neither of us looked back. It was an incident that never happened. After all, hadn't Raven and his orphan died at the gates of Charm? Question mark. Back to the company, back to business, back to the parade of years, back to these annals, back to fear. 37 years before the comet returns, the vision has to be false. I'll never survive that long. Will I?" Great way to end a book. Absolutely perfect. The incident at Charm, didn't Raven and his orphan die? It was an incident that never happened. Oh man, that's insane. And then afterward, it's cool, especially considering what the beginning of the book starts with. Before even the first chapter, there is a little tidbit that starts off with Croker spoke to assembled company, and he reminds them why they're called the Black Company. He talks about a little bit of their history, and then he says that he believes that this final mission with Lady is going to be the end of the Black Company. This is their final mission, and once they fall and they are no more, that will be the last of the 12 true companies gone, and a new era will begin on the world. Um, and then it just ends with, "But Croker was wrong." And I think that final line, "I'll never survive that long, will I?" with a question mark really is indicative of that. And I mean, it's no secret there's quite a bit of Black Company books. I've only read this one, but I actually do have Horde of Shadows, which technically chronologically is after this. But everybody that I've seen and all the videos I've watched has told me, don't read it next. It's something you want to read way later in the series, at the point it was written, in the physical chronology. Um, and then I also have a copy of Shadow Games, but that is part of the second series of Black Company books, which are the Books of the South. I should be getting the omnibus editions for all of the omnibus editions soon. So I will have the books of the North, the books of the South, um, the books of the Glittering Sea, I think is what they're called. Don't quote me on that. But I think that's Water Sleeps and Soldiers Live. And then I already have that copy of what's it called? I already have that copy of Port of Shadows. So hopefully I'll be reading all of the Black Company books, and I still believe they're being published to this day. I think one got published recently. I don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure one got published recently in December of 2025, or is being published soon, or maybe it's a reprinting. I'm not quite sure, but I think it was a new book. Whatever the case, I really enjoyed Glenn Cook's writing. I really enjoyed The Black Company, and I just wanted to talk about it a little bit because I see people give this book a lot of love online, and I'm quite happy about that because I do believe it is some of the best of the fantasy genre. And I really do believe that quote I heard of there's before the Black Company and there's after the Black Company. And Glenn Cook's writing is amazing. I've read a little bit of his other fantasy series. I mean, he has a couple, but I've read a little bit of The Dread Empire, which is probably his other biggest fantasy series. And I haven't finished it, but the beginning of that book was also quite good. Very different from the Black Company, but still good. I really enjoy his writing in this, and I hope that maybe if you maybe this reminds you of why you loved the book. I just wanted to talk about it because I love it so much, and I wanted to share my thoughts on it. If you did watch, thank you. If you made it all the way to here, I know it's pretty long-winded, just talking about a measly 300-page book, but those 300 pages are packed with pulpy goodness. Um, so yeah. I hope you enjoyed, and I thank you for watching, and I hope that you have a good day. Goodbye.